It's a world that we're in.
I like that shirt.
How far we will go.
My personal shopper. My boys, my wife.
It's nice of her to pick that up for you. That's very snazzy.
It is snazzy.
Not to tease you, but
Wednesday, March 20th, 2019, the Village of Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. Could I have a roll call, please?
Certainly, Member Badger.
Here.
Member Burns.
Here.
Member Danley.
here.
Member Miller.
Here.
Member Murray.
Here.
Member Russell.
Here.
Chair Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Non-agenda items, I think we probably, are you the petitioner, ma'am? Yes. Okay. Well, just for the record, we do offer the opportunity for non-agenda items to be addressed by the public as our second agenda item. But seeing nobody in the population that's going to participate, we'll go on to agenda item number 3, consideration of the January 16, 2019 PCZBA regular meeting minutes. Have we had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Any comments, recommendations, revisions?
Nope.
Could we have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 4. Mr. Cole, if you want to announce this, that'll be great.
Certainly. So your one agenda item for tonight, 1875 Shore Acres Drive. It's an electric lift. So as those of you who have been on the PCZBA for a while may remember, at some time in the past, electric lifts actually required a variation to undertake because they involve construction in a steep slope zone. Back in 2016, this group recommended, the village board adopted an amendment that still makes it a little bit easier procedurally for these to be constructed, but still requires applicants to appear before this body and seek a special use permit, which again, still must be approved by the board. So the village engineer has reviewed this, no objections in that regard. We've included some plans and some dimensions and things to help you be familiar with it. In addition, we've given you a bit of a legislative history about when you've touched this issue before, as we talked about in our January meeting. I would note, just for the record, that the applicant provided an incorrect legal description on their application. The legal description on the survey is correct, our legal notice is correct, everything else is correct. So just noting that as a formality. So the applicants provided some statements as far as the standards for a special use permit. I'm happy to answer any questions the PCZBA may have, or we can give the applicant a chance to speak and go from there.
All right. Yes, ma'am, if you'd like to take the podium and introduce yourself and your residence, and we'll go through the process.
My name is Brandy Purall. I am representing C&M Development, who would be installing the tram or the elevator lift on the bluff on behalf of the homeowner.
Okay. If you could just give us a brief description of the plan, and then we'll go through the various elements that you have to address.
Yeah, so you want me to go over plan as in from start to finish, or what's?
Just very, very brief.
Oh,
Mentions, length.
the tram is.
Yes, I must swear you in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Usually we have a few more people here, and so,
Okay,
yeah, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So the tram is 3 feet wide by 4 feet long. It is used to basically get from the top of the bluff to the bottom of the bluff as safe as possible. There is airline steel cables that harness the tram, I would say. There's little to no noise, so it would never disrupt the neighbors. The only thing that would be semi-disruptive is just the piles being put into the bluff. It is a very safe alternative rather than using the stairs. Unfortunately, the homeowners are a little bit older, so they can't use the stairs as well to get down to their deck at the bottom of the bluff.
What are the dimensions of the landing, if I may ask?
So the landings are actually going to be, the landing is gonna be in the existing deck, so there isn't gonna be anything built at the bottom. They're just going to cut out a section of the existing deck to accommodate the tram. So there wouldn't have to be any stairs going up or, down off of the tram onto the deck.
We can't just incorporate by reference, could we? Yeah. Maybe to make it a little smoother for you, we'll just incorporate by reference, or adopt and incorporate by reference the standards for variations that you addressed and the standards for special use permit that you've addressed, so you don't have to verbatim read those into the record. So why don't we open it up to the commissioners for questions? Sam?
Yeah, I guess the only question that I had was, there's a number of trams already. Have we any records of any damage or any erosion or any negative impact from existing trams today?
Nope. Nothing that came up in our review or the village engineer's review.
The only other question I sort of picked up, because I've heard a number of these before, but in the analysis, says the village engineer has reviewed the plans and does not recommend against issuance of the special use permit. I just thought
Yeah,
that was an interesting choice of words.
Double negative. I mean, we don't, we typically don't make positive recommendations to this body. We just, we would typically tell you not to do something.
Right, right.
So we did not elect to do that.
Okay. I just needed a little bit of clarity. I feel better now. Thank you.
I think we all paused at the same statement.
We will avoid double negatives in the future.
Got it. I have no further question.
Member Burns?
I think I only had one question. It sounds as though you may have answered it already, and that was, in the renderings of the new situation, you see these landings. Am I understanding correctly that the landing on the bottom is existing then? That there's,
Yeah, so part of the, there is a deck existing at the bottom, because there is no beach, so it's just the deck. There is a deck existing, so they would just cut out a section of the deck and to make it landing, so they wouldn't have to actually build anything at the bottom of the bluff.
okay, that was kind of the key, is just whether adding to it, that would kind of be a separate issue, I would assume, for us,
Yeah.
beyond just a tram. And then is the same true on the top, or is that a new
The top,
landing up on top?
the top, something would have to be built,
Okay.
for fence and lock wise, so kids or anybody can't just get on it,
Yeah,
so.
so I think I'm okay with that, but does that, is that, because it sounds like the variance is for the tram, is building that deck that they're proposing up on top really effectively, it's a deck, I mean, it's a landing, but it's also a deck, is that within their right, it doesn't require a variance or anything like that? That's kind of what I'm assuming, but I just wanted to confirm.
Yep, that's correct. So the applicant has filled out the standards for a variation. You're not actually granting a variation here. It's only a special use permit.
Okay, but they wouldn't need a special use permit then, either for the deck
For
up
just
on
the
top?
decking, no.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, that's it, otherwise, I'm fine with it.
Thank you. Member Danley?
I was just looking at the standards for special use permits, and I really think the only one that I was concerned about was the destruction of significant features, and clearly you're not going to be, as long as we've been told that there's nothing that you're going to erode the bluff or have any damage. Also, you had a positive response for a neighbor that was in favor of this. So to have an alternative means of transport like this, and that it's already been done in our community, I'm in favor. I have no other questions other than, that was just my one concern.
Thank you. Member Miller?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Member Murray?
So I think it may be outside the scope of the issue that we're dealing with tonight, strictly speaking, but do the owners of the property have any particular plans with respect to the beach? you know, one of the things that you're doing by this is increasing access to the shoreline. And, you know, I could see that as no pun intended, a bit of a slippery slope to, you know, we want to reclaim a lot of, you know, lake bottom. We want to pump a lot of sand out onto a beach. Are there
No,
any existing plans that you're aware of?
No. they're not.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Member Russell?
Yeah, the only question I had, and maybe this is directed more at staff, is, was the side yard setback confirmed for this? I'm assuming we treat these as accessory structures, and I didn't see any reference to it in the
Yeah,
plans.
so
I'm
it's,
not concerned personally about it, because it's inside of the, towards the center of the lot from the existing staircase. Just
Yeah,
didn't see a reference to it, and it looked like it may be close. That's all.
Yeah, we took a look at that just in determining, part of the calculations you see on the memo there to determine if a structure, as you know, is so large, it needs to be subject to the principal building setbacks, even though it may be an accessory structure. So at that point, I don't remember what the exact standard is. I think it's just 5 feet off the side yard. But we determined that there was the adequate space necessary.
Okay. Otherwise, I don't have any concerns. I think generally, when I've heard discussions about these in the past, that they're all, for the most part, these small systems are installed with posts driven into the bluff, and they're much less disruptive to the bluff face than if someone would build a staircase down the bluff. And we do allow staircases as a matter of right, so I'm in favor of this proposal, and I think it meets the standards for special use.
Thank you.
Is the staircase going to remain?
I believe so, yes.
From
The
a,
drawing indicates,
oh,
the
go
drawing indicates it does remain, but it's a great question of whether they would replace the existing stair with a.
I
more
am not
modern
aware of them possibly getting rid of the staircase or fixing it up. There's nothing wrong with it, they're just a little older and they can't do the stairs as well.
So a question for the staff, if they wanted to replace the staircase, are we necessarily approving that tonight?
Standing on its own, if they were to replace the staircase, they can just do that without any review by a body such as this.
Thank you.
From an aesthetic perspective, and that really has no bearing on the petition, what are the colors? What's the color scheme?
The standard color is black, black cart, and then the rails are just regular metal. They can be powder coated to any color that the homeowner wants. We usually only offer very neutral colors. We don't want it to stand out too much. So we really only give the option of regular metal, black or brown.
I see. And if there were any environmental concerns, that would be addressed by the building commission or?
It depends what we're referring to, but yeah, generally speaking.
Okay, I have no other questions. Any further discussion? Could we have a motion, please?
Are we recommending, or are we?
You're recommending, I presume, approval of a special use permit to the village board? Or
Motion.
recommending the board approve it?
Yeah, motion to recommend approval of the special use permit.
Seconded.
Okay, could we have a vote, please?
Certainly, Member Badger.
Aye.
Member Burns.
Aye.
Member Danley.
Aye.
Member Miller.
Aye.
Member Murray.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have to tell her when she goes before the committee?
So Brandy, I'll email you. You'll be at the village board here in a couple weeks. So you're welcome to attend if you'd like to. It's not a requirement, but we can talk more. Yeah, this is a good time to submit those plans and stuff, so. But yeah.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 5, staff report.
Certainly, so a brief staff report to complement a brief meeting. Just want to inform you of some other plans going on out there in the village. So as you know, here previously, well, I think it was after this group's last meeting, the institutional zoning, the real ordinance was approved, so that's in effect. We almost have you very shiny colored new zoning maps save for one hiccup we're still working through as far as our southern border. So interesting trivia I won't bore you with, but
Trouble with
again,
Lake Forest? Is that what it-
no, it just turns out that on our funny enough, yes, but not really. On our historical maps, there has always been a little carve out for Lake Forest Cemetery that isn't accurate. It's in our town, and so we are still trying to make sure we know what zone it is. Not that that should actually matter in the future. So there's your trivia for the day. So stay tuned on that. Again, I shared in an email, but the village board did express their thanks to you for your diligent work on this. It's a good success. The Sustainability and Community Enhancement Ad Hoc Committee forwarded a landscape playbook. We forwarded the draft to this group. That was approved by the village board recently as well. So policy of the village, they're moving on to look at some landscape designs along 176. We hope we're working to get a proposal for that now, so exciting. There's a draft sustainability plan out there that when that's a little bit further along, we'll share with this group as well for a chance to review some very exciting stuff. And then this past Saturday, the village board and the Historic Preservation Commission held a morning workshop that I think was very interesting. So that may result in a plan adoption as well. I'll share the slides out afterwards if you'd like to take a look at them, but kind of really rethinking how historic preservation works in the village, what are our goals, trying to move past just looking at the ordinance and really looking at, because the ordinance really has mattered when houses are being torn down, when they're at the end of their life, and we're really trying to make more of a life cycle look at who we're attracting to Lake Bluff, look at who's buying these houses, look at trying to build these supports all along the way to make preservation happen in the village. So, interesting stuff afoot. I know Village Attorney Schuster has an announcement as well he'd like to make.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was hopefully going to either go out today, or if not, tomorrow, you will all be receiving, or should be receiving, invitations to our biennial seminar. Every 2 years, Holland and Knight, at the beginning of May, does a full day of training, of educational seminars for our clients. That I don't know how many here have been to one in the past. Have you?
Nope.
Remember, Russell, I believe, I'm sure you have
Yeah.
over the years. So May 2nd, which is a Thursday, we will be at Ravinia Festival up in Highland Park, and each time, and it's usually about 250 public officials and public employees from our clients, and we have all-day different seminars that we do that range from Public Official 101, particularly because right after the municipal election, so for new officials or those who want to brush up on just general governance issues, to zoning matters and other legal issues that are not only in your wheelhouse as a plan of PCZBA, but also just as people who have interest in municipal policy and legal issues. Each time we do this, it's always a little different. Some of the topics we cover, we try to make it timely, and I think it's always both educational and fun, because you'll get to meet people from all over the Chicagoland area who do what you do. So please come. We'd love to have all of you, and it's just a really good day. So mark it on your calendars, May 2nd.
That would conclude our report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners report.
I was just gonna, I was contacted by somebody who had a business, actually represented for a business that was looking for some space in the industrial park. And this particular use fell out of the permitted uses and into a special use, I believe. And it sort of struck me as the type of business that generated sales tax, didn't really have a retail component to it. It's more of a delivery. It's a florist. But I happen to know the representative because I'm in that business, and sort of talking about sort of the barriers to entry that they were facing to lease a small space in the industrial park. And I just thought it was interesting, I thought it was worthwhile to talk about. This is kind of our whole idea of trying to sort of remove these barriers of entry on, of course, for businesses that do kind of are on the fringe, that maybe are different from what our planned zoning was in there. But this is a florist that, is not a permitted use in the industrial park. And it just seemed kind of probably one of maybe many uses that are out there that we just haven't really thought through or gotten to it, that probably should not have to worry about having special meetings with, the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Village Board, or even have to submit the permit fees, or I should say, how do we special use fees?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just to put a number on it, so typically, most of the applications you see before you, they've paid a $3,000 escrow, from which I take a $750 application fee. And then they'll typically pay a couple hundred extra in other costs, so legal notice, recordation.
So they're, and so they're all, usually, for anyone that does come in front of us, they are ultimately paying $3,000. Or is that not accurate?
Most of that money goes back. I would say 1,000 to 1,200 is probably the norm.
Part of it depends on how much legal work is involved. So if it's something that's overly complicated or something that requires extensive approval documents, larger projects, or, a special use where there would be a lot of conditions and a highly negotiated agreement, that's going to be more costly. A typical, for example, the applicant today, we will draft up a special use ordinance, but you're talking 20 minutes versus what could be hours.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it just depends on the how complicated the application is.
Right.
So fees can range, just to give you all a ballpark, I mean, if you're talking about a major development, it can be tens of thousands of dollars, depending on what the actual development is. If you're talking about a full-blown development agreement and, so it just.
Well, those are, that's very complex.
And that's very
And no doubt about it. And then, I'm not arguing the fee at all, really. It's all for good reason, and for a business that is, $750 or $1,000 isn't the end of the world. I guess the thought is this just a small barrier to entry, to open up a business in the industrial park, which normally seems like something that we'd want them there. And in being part of that business, I understand if you're looking at, a 3,000 square foot unit in Lake Bluff, a 3,000 square foot unit in Libertyville, and a 3,000 square foot in Lake Forest, it's kind of a toss-up, I've got to jump through these hoops to be in Lake Bluff. I'm just going to Libertyville, or I'm just going to Lake Forest. I don't know that that's where we want to be. For those types of uses. And I know it's very hard for, to sort of, we don't want to open it up too much, but once again, part of our discussions over the years has been to streamline, some of the process. And I knew we had a light meeting here tonight, and so I thought I'd throw it out there for discussion.
I don't want to probe too deeply, but would this be retail or would this be wholesale?
So it's a service that if you're having a wedding, you might sit down with them, discuss the plans of the, flowers and so forth, but it's all gonna be delivered. So you're not going in there for, some flowers. It's not gonna be like a florist that you see in downtown Lake Forest, or, it's more of a wholesale, but yet there is still, wholesale's the wrong word, because wholesale indicates no sales tax revenue. There is sales tax that's being generated out of this, which just is another, another aspect of it that we as a village would benefit from.
Is it Joseph's? Joseph's?
He's trying to guess the name.
No.
Oh.
No.
Because they're looking for space too. They're in Libertyville right now. And they want to do wholesale and they're looking at
Oh,
space.
no, it's not. It's another,
Doesn't matter. I was just curious.
another group.
I think it speaks to we obviously saw Kings and Convicts with a disappointing decision. I suspect that was grounded more in state taxation than in kind of anything else.
I mean, there's a number of different factors in that decision-making process that
I'm sure there
didn't
were.
line up,
Yeah,
of course.
it just didn't line up. But I suspect that of that, the top of the list probably isn't the PCZBA or our particular local regs. But I think it's a great example that you're raising of a barrier to entry in the community, which could create jobs, it creates tax revenue, it creates foot traffic, well, it creates traffic, which all could be positive things, and I don't know why that sort of thing would be on the books.
I don't know if it's a quirk of the code that maybe that's not a permitted use. I suspect there's a reason behind it, why that it's a special use and not a permitted use, but
Yeah, so if I was to speculate, I would say it's the intersection of two patterns in the code. So one pattern would be when these use categories were originally made, you had an industrial park that wasn't really seen as being a sales tax generator. You had a central business district that was. Forests are allowed in the central business district, and they just didn't carry the letter P over. The other I would say that you're familiar with is typically prior ZBAs, the approach has been make the minimal, I would say make the smallest changes possible and make them in response to petitions. I don't know, I don't want to say that, I'm not aware of broader changes being brought and being turned down. I don't know that history, but certainly the results look like, there's these narrowly made changes to the code over time. And so when that's the mode of updating the code, it follows that you would get some of these weird situations, perhaps.
It was probably only a year or two, Glenn, before you started with the village, that the village did adopt a complete new use table for all of the uses in the industrial park, if not throughout the village, and it went through an extensive discussion at this body. I don't know if any of the faces were even on board then, except maybe Gary. But one of the motivations behind that was to try to not prevent a business that would cause no harm from deciding not to come to the village simply because they had to go through the review process. And there was a pretty extensive discussion of all these different types of categories. So it doesn't date back for decades. The use table was overhauled only about 5 years ago. And everyone chimed in at the PCZBA and at the village board, and some of them ended up as a permitted use, some ended up as a special use. And I personally don't remember the florist item.
Either do I. I can't. And I was on the board. I was part of those discussions, and I heard the whole thing.
Maybe there's something
Possible we obviously
in the
missed
record
one.
about it.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make the point that it doesn't go all the way back 30 or 40 years ago. It was relatively recently looked at, and one of the motivations definitely was to try and not create stumbling blocks for businesses that we wanted, to move into our industrial park. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there was even a florist category, or whether you could make the argument that this really isn't the florist, it's some sort of consulting business. I mean, I'm not sure, Sam, but I'm not sure we had a florist category in that.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember either.
So I've got a comment. Excuse me, what came to mind on this was, for me, actually the comprehensive plan. Because I remember, if I remember correctly, as we were looking at the goals and as we were looking at the districts and the L1 district came up, one of our priorities, considering that we want to increase economic development and revenue, and we learned that there's very little revenue coming from the CBD, and if we're gonna try to increase revenue, we should focus on the L1 district. That I think I remember that one of our, and I can't remember if it was a priority or an action, was to try to improve, and I'm using a particularly ambiguous or vague word there, improve the attraction or the ability of or the ease of development within the L1 district, because we knew that that would be a great way to leverage that area to bring in a bunch of revenue. And I guess my question to Glenn is, you know, we're nearing, or we're progressing nicely through the comprehensive plan, and at some time in the relatively near future we'll be done with it. Instead of, I'm not opposed to addressing the florist item individually, but when we get done with the comprehensive plan, given that this is the first time, probably for all of us, of doing a comprehensive plan, is there a time at the end where we reflect on the items that we have jurisdiction for, the actions that are taken, and then prioritize them and say, okay, well, we said we wanted to do this, this, and this, and so from a policy setting perspective, or from a, you know, adjusting ordinances, or looking at these permitted uses and special use permits, we take the comprehensive plan as a little bit of a work plan for us to whatever is within our jurisdiction. Some of it's gonna be for the board, some of it's gonna be for lots of different bodies, but some of it may come to us to say, hey, you need to go back and revisit this and revisit that. And there was a lot of that kind of explore and check into. So I would think this would very nicely fit with that kind of initiative. But I'm just wondering, is that a typical thing where we'd go back and say, okay, here's our tasks over the next how many years, you know, that we need to address. Some things are gonna take longer than others, and then put kind of an agenda together so that when we have time, I mean, again, it's gonna have to fit in with all the zoning things, we'd say, okay, let's pull the review of L1 district, you know, zoning, and whether that be height, because it just came up a few months ago too with the whole parking and height, and so we might want to look at that comprehensively to say, how do we make the L1 district more attractive, and how do we bring more people in and encourage development in the right way. So just as an example, I think this would fit nicely into that, but I have no idea how that works once we finish up the comprehensive plan. I would hope it doesn't just fall into it, you know, it's in a document, it just kind of sits there until the next time it gets reviewed.
Sure, so I would answer that in two ways. So first, as far as an update on the comprehensive plan, I will be transparent in saying I haven't made the progress I've wanted to on that document with everything else going on. My goal in the next 45-ish or so days is to try to bring you a full draft. So I don't know if that'll quite be in time for April or not. But, you know, that's been my last 2 weekends. It's going to be my time going forward. So as far as to your direct question, Member Burns, I would say a lot of the comprehensive plan is a lot like any plan. It's what you make of it. So there's a whole continuum from document on a shelf to a very active plan. You know, you could have just sort of the goals and action steps. Some committees would do that. Some committees would have a separate document that says, all right, out of the whole world of goals, this is something we're doing with the sustainability plan actually, is here's the 2 goals we want to focus on in 18, and here's the 2 in 19, and here's the 2 in 20, and really trying to nail down for themselves and also say for a village board or a city council where their priorities are, and to make sure they've got the blessing to pursue them. So certainly I would think my sense of this group is that you're interested in being proactive about these things, and we'll try to bring you the tools to help you do that.
Okay, thanks. And I would encourage, you know, Chair Peters and the board that is an exercise that I would be very much in favor of, is when we get done with the comprehensive plan, just to kind of look through it and discuss what our priorities are that are relevant to our board. No matter how lengthy they are, I mean, it may take a while, like 1 per year if it has to be, whatever it is, but to review that, just so it's, I'd hate to see it just be a book on the shelf.
I think you're right. I truly think we're in an interesting time. You know, I think we're working differently, we're driving differently, we work, we live, our community, and I think we have a wonderful opportunity in the district to consider it to become a far greater potential, and I think it's truly there if we allow a little bit more breathing room to grow and enhance it in a way to really look at that comprehensive plan and not just rely on a consultant that goes with the norm, but really go with what can be something a little bit more from that. And I think we all are interested in looking a little bit broader in a land that I think has great value in many ways for our community. So I'm all in favor of really spending time adjusting if need be and moving forward.
Oh, those are all excellent points, and I think they'll be memorialized in the minutes, and so we don't lose track.
On a somewhat related note, you brought up the development that they were just, the medical office development. Is that still progressing, or do you have any updated information on that?
Sure, happy to talk a bit more elsewhere, but at this time, that development we don't think is moving forward.
Okay.
So not a proceeding deal, not a, I don't know a better word, collapsing deal, but still not within their due diligence period. They didn't secure a tenant. So the deal's not concluded, certainly, but it's no longer under contract.
The sign is down.
The sign is down.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps another data point, Sam, on your underlying point. A lot of hoops.
Sam, how about your regular question?
I've forgotten it after that.
The one you ask every month.
Oh.
There is no update on Stonebridge.
Any update on, no, Harrison Howe?
No update on Stonebridge, no update on Block 3, nothing cooking.
So the Block 3, the PNC Bank is still there, and then the other two lots are owned separately from another, but now those look like they're back on the market as well. It appears that the house that was gonna go in there is no longer
Yeah, so I'm not,
proceeding.
I hope our timelines are lined up. So my understanding was that house started going away around summerish. I think the family that owned it had a child or something, so power to them. And so there was a sign up for a while. The sign, I think, went down for a while. I don't think it was under contract or anything. And then I think it's gone back up recently. So by right, you'd be able to build one house there.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the commissioners, or thoughts? Any other business that we should address tonight? Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion adjourned.
So then-